Welcome to the Reframing Eye Care podcast. I am Dr. Maria Sampalis, your host, and our guest today is Dr. Dr. Penn. He works at Walmart and Florida. Welcome, Doc. Thank you for
Good morning, everybody. How are you? Good morning, Maria.
It's great to have you on. I love to do corporate OD spotlights, and you've been, corporate OD for a long time. You graduated with a BS in biology in 1978. Taught biology and general science for 8 years and then decided to go to PCO at 30 years old. That was pretty brave, right? And
interesting story, actually. After teaching for quite a while, I actually had a problem with one of my eyes, and I called a good friend of mine who was a fraternity brother of mine in college and went to visit him, said, I got this issue, and he said, come on in and we'll take a look at it. And after we were done, it was really interesting because he sort of looked me square in the face and said, how much money do you make? I said, why is that? He said, just answer the question. I did. And he said, you got to be kidding me. He said, we went to the same undergraduate school. I was just a little more advanced than you were. Go back to school, take some classes, and think about optometry. And I have to tell you, I've never looked back since. It was just one of the changing things in my life.
Great.
He did a great job.
That's great. Yeah. And then graduated, in 1991 from PCO. With medical treatment and ocular disease and contact lenses, worked for an MD for 1 year, and then recruited from Sears Optical in Florida, worked there for 9 years, went over to Walmart to practice, been there for 23 years now. And,
Absolutely.
You've lectured with Bausch & Lomb, Cooper Vision, and other local optician groups, and now currently the board of directors for AACO. So pretty nice corporate career here over the years that you've been able to accomplish.
Well, it's interesting when you think about what time you're getting involved in this particular type of field. When you're coming out of school, your options are much, much more open in terms of working for a doctor, working for yourself, going into the military, corporate practice, and so on like that. When you're at 30 coming into the field, you really don't have as many options because then you've got to start financing and so on like that. So it made it easier for me to walk into a corporate practice, basically with the shirt on my back and the knowledge in my head, and begin a primary care practice, which was just exactly what my calling was at that point in time.
Yeah. I know you told us how you got into optometry. Can you tell us how your career led you for education and how you feel like that made you a good experience as an OD?
Absolutely. When I came out of undergraduate school, well, right before I came out, I should say, a very good friend of mine, my roommate, as a matter of fact, we both had basically just sort of got by on what we needed to get into optometry school, but not quite enough. So we went into education. And the 10 years that I spent teaching probably was one of the greatest experiences in helping me to become an effective doctor. And I have to say that interacting with people from students' age to parents to administrators gave you that whole plethora of communication skills, which now I bring to my practice. And truthfully, I have a little philosophy, which is the only difference between a teacher and a doctor is the size of your classroom. Because you think, and when you're a doctor, you have one person, maybe two, but you're using the same exact communication skills. You're imparting your information, your education on your patients. And I think one of my goals, and I think all of us as doctors, is we want to at least teach our patients something maybe they didn't know, or educate them about something they didn't know before they came into your room. And it gets to a point after a while where you make that as part of your daily routine. Even if someone's coming in for a routine exam, how can you educate them in where they're at, where they're going? Is there other questions they might have? So that teaching really was, I would recommend it highly, although not very many people are going to take that route intentionally. If you have the opportunity to do lecturing and teaching and so on like that, it really enhances your skills and your ability to communicate with your patients. And I think that is probably the most important thing that we do, because without that, you're just walking in, doing an exam, the patient's walking out. And I'll tell you what, I've had a good experience. And then I always ask patients when they come in that I've never seen before, who was your previous eye doctor? And a lot of times they just don't know. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm pretty sure you know who your dentist is, or your chiropractor, or one of your specialists. Why don't you know your optometrist's name? And I think the reason is because we are not impressing them and engaging them enough for them to remember our names. And it's really, really important. So when I have people come in as referrals, they're coming in because they've heard my name. They're coming in because they've heard your name. Someone referred us. but they come in by name. And that's really, really important, as important as it is for us to know our patients' names.
Of course it is. Yeah. Can you give us, like, when you transitioned from teaching to optometry school, like, how did you do? Was it tough to go back to school at a later age?
It was initially pretty cruel, to be truthful. When you're working and then you have to go back and start studying again. But what I did was, excuse me, morning. I decided I wanted to take some classes first. And so I went back to a local school and I took all of what was considered the hardest classes that I took in undergraduate again, just to see, do I still have the discipline and the ability to learn this stuff? And so I went and took biochemistry, I took organic chemistry, I took physics. And the incredible thing was, as average as I did, excuse me, as average as I did in undergraduate school, when I took these classes again, it was almost as if I knew this. I was born knowing these things. It came back, it was easy, it made sense, but I had to test myself to make sure that I had the responsibility and the motivation to go do this. And after going through these classes again, I just sat back and said, what was I thinking about all these years? I really should have done this a lot sooner. But the bottom line is I just wasn't ready.
Yeah. And when you graduated optometry school, you decided to work with an MD. Tell us about that, why you chose that, and how you, you only lasted a year there and then chose to work with Sears Optical.
Well, what happened, I was working in outside of Philadelphia. Excuse me. There we go. I was working outside of Philadelphia, and I had wanted to, because I did my internship in Florida, I wanted to go back to Florida as quickly as possible. So once I took the Florida boards, which were pretty hard, and I think it's one of the hardest tests in the nation right now, I got a job working as a tech by way of an optometrist that I did my internship with, and it was for an ophthalmologist. And so basically I was a glorified tech, a relatively high paid tech. And over the course of a year, it got to the point there where when I finally passed my boards, that they almost didn't want me there because I was doing everything they were doing. And this particular practice was very involved in seeing their patients, which I respect that, but not to the point of, wanting to not have someone do their tech work. So with that in mind, the year that I was there, I did all of the post-op, pre-op cataract surgery, workups rather. We did all of the medical side of the optometry, and that was really pretty much what I was trained for. Over the course of a year, my gosh, I'm so sorry. Over the course of a year, by the end of that tenure, I think we both decided, and it was a team decision, that I needed to move on. And the one thing I really came out of that with is I don't want to work for anybody.
Yeah.
I want to work for myself.
Yeah, that's one
I
of the
don't want to
good
have
things
any of the bills and liabilities and so on that these people have. It was a great experience for me. It really honed in my diagnostic skills. But in the long run, I needed to branch out and do what I needed to do. Where it happened with Sears is that I put my name into the circuit and the corporate optometry circuit. And a gentleman who was a recruiter for Sears, who had pretty much all of Central Florida, called me and said, hey, we have some practices that are open. Let's go around to a few of them and see what you think. And being from Philadelphia and spending a lot of time on the Jersey Shore, of all the practices that I had access to, one was in Melbourne, Florida, which is where I'm at now, which is about 5 miles off the ocean, which is great. So I felt as if I was sort of, coming to that retirement spot, even though this is where I'm going to be working.
Sears Optical back in the day used to be the place to be, right?
It was the place.
Yeah, a lot of doctors chose that. That was the first choice back then. Yeah.
Yep. And it was easy access. And that's really the thing. At that point in time, they were looking for dedicated, sincere doctors to really get in there and take over their practices. I was very fortunate. I had a gentleman working at the Sears that I was at who was getting ready to retire. And so it was just a slip right in, which was great.
Yeah. And how did you transition into Walmart after? Is it just like Sears changed over the years and Walmart was a bigger opportunity at that point? Or
Absolutely. The neighborhood where the Sears was located was going downhill, in that the community was getting a little bit more broken down. You know that you're having trouble when one of your major supermarkets closes up. And that's what we thought about it. So I saw the decline of the area commercially, and the manager of the Sears that I was working at was being recruited by Walmart. And so we had such a great rapport together that he pulled me aside one day and said, listen, why don't you come and interview with Walmart? So he spoke with a recruiter there, and we sat down, and I think about half a dozen people that had applied for this. Fortunately for me, I was the only one that was untied to any other responsibilities. So one doctor had 2 practices, another doctor had a couple other corporate practices. And I think because this was an up and coming area at the time, they wanted someone who was going to dedicate 100% of their time to building this practice.
Yeah.
So this neighborhood where my particular office is right now is a relatively young area over the course of things. I mean, I've been there 22 years, but when I started at that point in time, the area itself was completely underdeveloped. It was the largest project and one of the flagship stores for Walmart, which is great because we get all the new technology. Mm-hmm. So coming in there, I have to say the downside of that is even though I only moved across the other side of town, I probably lost about 80% of my patient base. They were all from that point south. So I had to really struggle to get motivated and get people to know that there was a doctor there. And surprisingly enough, and you probably experienced this yourself, even to this day, there are times when people will come in and say, I never knew there was an eye doctor here.
Yeah, that's true.
And as big as Walmart is, and as much as they sort of somewhat advertise what you're there, it's great to know that once the word gets spread around that there is a doctor at that particular location, the community really responds very well.
Yeah, you get a lot of patients that will come because they go there for glasses. I mean, you've been with Walmart for a long time, so I would imagine that you have great experience with them. But what was your initial experience in corporate optometry, and how did it change your impression of corporate optometry over the years? Because I'm sure when you started with corporate optometry a while ago, it's much different than what it is today.
I think so, to a certain extent. When I first got in, because they were so happy to have a full-time doctor there, it was pretty much do whatever you want to do. We'd like you to be there, this amount of time. We request it. Of course, they really can't tell you what to do, but they sort of imply. And you have to understand that if you want to make a living, you have to work.
Yeah,
that's what it comes down to. Yeah, you have to work. So, you're not really that adverse to to fulfilling requirements and recommendations that they sort of put up front. And it was a really good experience because they let me be a doctor. I was not in any way confined by material recommendations, any kind of purchasing, any kind of non-optometric responsibilities. Basically, and I look at it this way now, I will write a prescription for someone and we'd like you to keep it in-house, but I can't tell you to do that. And then I sit back and say, okay, here's my next patient. If there's an issue with materials, that's all on the corporate side. That's on their side. If there's accounts receivable, on the corporate side. Staff problems, other than what staff I had at the time, it's on the corporate side. So it really opened up my eyes in that now I'm not as worried about the liabilities of private practice or even working for someone else. I can concern myself with being a doctor. Even contact lens reps, drug reps, people that come in like that, there's no one really telling me what to do. I do what I feel in my best conscience is the best for my patients. And coming into corporate optometry just enabled me to do that without all of the other outside issues coming in and really clogging the scene.
Yeah. What do you focus on in Walmart? Is it high medical practice like Dr. LaRosa? What in that area? I would assume it's more older patients, right? So it's more
no, and you know what? No? Interesting. It's actually not. There's a few, but because it's a relatively new area, again, 20 years is not new, but in Florida it really is. There's a lot of younger families moving in. This is an exciting area because of the Space Coast. So we have a lot of people coming in. Elon Musk, brought in the whole SpaceX and all of the NASA issues that were there. Interesting that for a while there, when the shuttle program closed down, that area just almost vacated because no one figured there would be anything else coming in. So when all of the big aerospace companies and tech companies moved back into Titusville, the population began to flood back in down here. And it is a lot of people, let's say my age and young. Also, because it's a relatively young community, we see a lot of kids. So it enables me to sort of play the full hand, the full deck of cards, from seeing kids with eye disease, seeing adults with eye disease, contact lens pathology, co-managing diabetes, high blood pressure, any type of eye issues. And I have to say in this area, we've got a fantastic group of ophthalmologists who work hand in hand with the optometry community. And that is probably one of the biggest things that works. But Walmart itself really has no effect on that, except it gives me the freedom, and it gives all the doctors that work within the Walmart group the freedom to do what we need to do. And that's really a very important thing. One of the stigmas that we had to get over when we came out of college was corporate optometry is sort of like a lesser form of optometry. And the reality of it is that is absolutely untrue. As a matter of fact, in some cases, even a purer form, because we're not hindered by some of the other issues that come in on a daily basis. I like the fact that we don't really have any biases. We don't have any specific prejudices. Working for Walmart, they really just pulled us in. I know I have a couple of colleagues that work for Walmart, and none of us have really had any problems. They're very responsive. We work as a team, even though, technically we are two separate entities, but that's the whole reason why this works.
Yeah.
Is because they team with us and they understand. They help when they can help. We help when we can help. As you can tell, I'm not short of words, so I definitely engage. I engage them, and we work together as a team. And I think the fact that the staff that they've hired, and we've gone through, a couple different changes, they bring in people that they feel are going to best work with the public as well. And we're sort of accessories to each other.
Well, that's great. And I think in general, though, being able to give your opinion to Walmart and them to take it to change things has been important. I think with any corporate optometry or doctors being affiliated, being able to freely express their opinions,
sure,
and have them make a change and not have it come back to the doctor, I think is important. But that shows what kind of organization it is too. And that's, for doctors to stay in retention, that's important too. Doctors need a voice. Doctors want to be involved, and they want to be able to freely express their opinion if they don't like something, for them to make a change.
Yes.
And I think that's the reason why you've been there for such a long time. I think the longevity says a lot about the company.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they've come up to us and said, listen, we're thinking about changing our contact lens inventory for sale. What lenses do you fit? Because they want to know what I'm doing so that they can then give that product out to the public, whether it's,
it's not, hey, we're getting a discount from this company. We want you to fit this.
Exactly.
Which is great.
Exactly.
Now you've been affiliated a long time. So recently you've been appointed to AACO Energize board. Can you tell us how that started, how you got involved, why it's so important for ODs to be involved in an organization like this?
Well, when I was lecturing for Bausch & Lomb, we had a group of doctors that were out there discussing a particular product they were selling. And when that sort of folded, a few members of that group decided to get together, since all of us were corporate optometrists that were in that group, and decided to get together and put an organization together that would represent, in very many facets, corporate optometry. So I was actually in on the ground floor of it, but I really wasn't at that point where I wanted to be in an administrative level. So back then it was called Energize, and there was a fantastic group of people and a great following. And basically, we were a liaison between optometry and corporate America, basically. We were originally just a Walmart group. And then as time went by, we realized that corporate optometry really encompasses all of the different entities, from Costco to Pearl to all the different companies that are out there, IMED and so on like that. And we would get together and discuss all the issues pertinent to corporate optometry: lease issues, equipment issues, staffing, medical supplies, anything that we could do as a private optometrist. It was great to be able to talk to people who actually have the same experiences as you do, just in a different location, really. And once that became more and more and more organized, the organization began to grow rather rapidly. And as that happened, I became a little bit more involved. And so over time, from watching the administration within that group come by, I became a little more friendly with them. Typically people, the board does their thing. And then they began to change a little bit in a very positive way. And that was, again, to encompass all of the different optometric corporate entities that are out there. Once that started, and once we really began to spread out and have our meetings and see what the capabilities and potential was for corporate optometry, it then became obvious that we had to get more involved. And there's a bunch of other people in the board there as well. But one of the president at the time had approached me and said, we'd like you to come and join the board. We have to get you approved and so on like that. And what it did for me is it gave me the ability to have a little bit more of a voice and an opinion in the group. And so it turns out to be an incredibly effective, and good group of people that are working for a common goal. And that is to allow optometrists to say, you know what, there is an organization outside of your local, your state, your national organization that really addresses issues that deal with corporate optometry. And that was really never the case. Basically, you went to continuing education, you did your optometric requirements. But if you had questions about things, you really didn't know who to answer unless it was just a friend or, a local colleague. Now we have an organization that is national, that allows anyone from any state in any corporate modality to get in touch with us and answer questions they might have. And I think that really empowers us and just expanded the scope of corporate optometry. And now we have a representative organization and people that are definitely working for our best interests.
That's great. Yeah, because doctors were on their own island, right? They just talk to their local, maybe if they're a Sears doctor. Now they can collaborate with Walmart doctors, Costco. And they also have a feeling of belonging, right?
Yes.
Where, there was, you go to that local Rhode Island Association meeting and maybe you're the only corporate doctor in the room and these doctors are private. And, sometimes right in front of you, they'll bash an organization and they know that you're affiliated. And it's unfortunate that it's probably less now, but it still goes on, unfortunately, in our industry. Do you think there's still a stigma with corporate practice and how do you think it's changed?
There is. And you see that actually at the student level.
Yeah.
One of the things that we were going to strive to do, and I was actually spearheading that particular committee, was to get out to the optometry schools and educate new students, third year students, let's say even fourth year students, that corporate optometry is a viable choice for them, especially people who don't have access to, incredible amounts of funds to buy into practices and so on like that, that you can come out and practice optometry exactly as you were taught. Now, unfortunately, one of the things that optometry school doesn't teach you is how to run a business. So that's sort of a trial and error kind of thing. But again, now you've got corporate optometry group to help you with that if you have any questions.
Well, I'll tell you, I came out of school and I didn't know a lot, but I wanted to learn, right? But where I really got like a huge step was working in a corporate optical, right?
Yes.
Because you can just go in right away. You make your mistakes. It's not big financial mistakes if you make mistakes. And a lot of these opticians have been there for such a long time that they help you, So that's kind of like an easy way, right?
It is.
It's the fastest way to ownership too, right?
Sure. It's a good way to get your foot in the door. And there's nothing to say that, okay, well, just because I became a corporate optometrist that I can't expand. I know we have quite a few members in our organization that have private practices as well. So you're not bound by this particular mode of practice, but I'll tell you, once you get a taste for self-employment and having control over your own world, it's a very addictive kind of thing. And knowing that there's no one standing over you expecting quotas and product endorsements and so on like that, you really get used to that, even to the point where sometimes people will approach you, and reps being that, sometimes a rep will come up and say, hey, look, could you do this for us? Could you do that for us? You know what? In reality, you're going to do what's best for your patient either way. So we're really hoping to get out there and to join with some of the corporations. Walmart has been doing some recruiting at some of the schools. We're looking to pair with Alcon, for Costco, all the groups, to say, look, if you want to do a meeting, let's have it at a school, because these are the people who you are most easily able to, easily, maybe a bad word, to influence, because you want to present to them what you have as soon as you can, so they have these choices to make. So whether it's Walmart, whether it's IMED, whether it's Costco, whether it's GCO, all these companies need to really embrace the fact that the future of optometry is in these new students. And we have to be able to approach them and educate them so they don't walk out thinking, well, a corporate optometry is just a second-rate optometrist. And I'll tell you what I've done. We had a meeting once, I'm trying to think where it was. And someone came up to me and said, how do you handle this? We're lesser optometrists in a Walmart. And basically what I said was, would you not go to the pharmacist over there because you think they're less of a pharmacist working at Walmart? And they looked at me and said, well, of course, that wouldn't bother me. Well, why should being an eye doctor bother you?
Of course.
You are trained, you have the same exact training, the same experience, and you have even more of an ability to make a direct connection with your patients without outside interference.
Of course, yeah. What advice would you give new grads or current ODs, pursuing an option as this mode of practice?
I really need to communicate with other doctors in the area. I know that when one of the last things that we did in PCO, we had to do a community study in an area that we thought we'd like to practice. And this was part of the curriculum. You actually had to do this. So we went out there. I had a partner who was with me in Fort Lauderdale at the time. And we actually went through and did some statistical studies. This is a little bit much, but we decided what type of doctors were out there. What is the percentage? Where are the areas that have the most amount of need? And what we realized at that point in time, the corporate optometry 20 years ago was really starting to snowball. There's no question about it. So my recommendation for new students is meet with people that are in all the different fields that you're interested in, whether it's a VA, a corporate practice, a medical practice, a private practice, and try to find out what you feel is your niche. No question about it. In terms of corporate optometry as being maybe a little bit higher on the level, it's all from exposure and all from experience. Once people see what corporate optometry really is and what we do, there's no longer this wall of separation between the different modalities in practice. You do realize that it is a pure practice of optometry. Your location really should not determine what kind of doctor that you are. There's no question about it.
That's correct. I want to thank you so much, Dr. Penn, for coming on the podcast, talking candidly about corporate optometry, your experience, talking about the biases that are going on still in our industry. I want to thank you so much for what you've done over the years to make it easier for optometrists like me starting out in corporate optometry, and AACO for their work that they are doing. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me. And for those people that are, in fact, watching, do yourself a favor and communicate with the AACO. There really is a lot of benefits out there. The education is fantastic. The people that you're working with are just wonderful people. They're just open-armed to allow you to become a part of the group. We have great conferences, great education, great materials. It is definitely a venue that you should approach and you should try to follow. It is the best way for you to stay in tune with your particular type of practice. And we will help you as much as we possibly can to get you involved and open up your eyes to really what is available for you out there in the field of optometry.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day. We appreciate it.